Over to you, Paresh, sir.
Hello and welcome to another episode of In Conversation with. In Conversation with is a part of the CASI Global New York Knowledge Series, where we invite senior management practitioners from across the world and try and understand what they do, how is it that they do, and get executable advice for our audiences. My name is Paresh Seth. I am a director at CASI. CASI is the world's largest platform for CSR and sustainability. We are into education, volunteering, and a couple of other businesses related to sustainability and CSR. We are also the world's largest volunteering platform with over 3 million volunteers. So today we have an extraordinary panel with two consultants, Anjani and Wanda, one from India, one from Europe. We have a consultant from Manila. We have a special guest from China, and we have a CSR practitioner with us. So this promises to be an exciting session. So let us start. Let us begin with asking Anjani to show his angle. Anjani is a part of the Big Four. He's from Deloitte. He's a partner at Deloitte. And let's start with what's your angle? Anjani ji, over to you.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you, Paresh. Let me just quickly introduce myself, and then I'll also talk about what is my angle today, and then take it from there. At the outset, thank you, Dr. Paresh, for inviting me to this session and for letting me share my thoughts on the corporate angle to sustainability and how I see the corporate world approaching sustainable profit. So I head an offering within Deloitte, Deloitte Consulting, which is called Strategy and Business Design. And one of the key components of that is helping our clients in defining their sustainability strategy, and then over a period of time helping them implement that. So what the angle that I want to take is how I'm seeing the corporate world start in its journey to sustainability, where the end state is not a trade-off between profitability and sustainability. It actually goes together. Today, whenever you speak to corporate honchos, it's always either a check in the box view to sustainability, or it's about, you can make one of the two. You can't make both. You can't be profitable and you can't be sustainable. So I've started to see some green shoots where I do think a lot of organizations across the world have started in that journey. And today, the angle that I will take is where do I see organizations, and there is an element of the pandemic that we find ourselves in, how that is accelerating some of the move. So what I did was I've put together a few slides, and let me try and share that with the panel here, and let me know once it's visible to all. Is this visible?
Yeah, it's visible. Perfect.
Okay, so effectively, what we are seeing is, with COVID being where it is, there is a fairly large concern, safety concerns that people have, whether it's traveling, whether it's eating out, whether it's going outside, whether it's going to a restaurant. And people are kind of also, so the unique thing about this pandemic is at the same time, it's a financial crisis and a health crisis. Now, that's again something we've never seen before. We've either seen financial crisis or health crisis, not not two in one in that sense. However, that's also leading to certain fundamental changes in consumer behavior. So as you will see, people have moved a lot more to online. People are a lot more comfortable sourcing from locally produced material, buying from local stores, because they believe that is going to give rise to sustainability. Right? People are also looking to buy a lot more things which earlier they wouldn't have bought online, and they're also trying to increase what they were buying online. They're increasing the quantum of that. But at the same time, we are also seeing that some of this new behavior, online purchasing, for example, is leading to new forms of waste, whether it's plastic, whether it's new packaging. And, all of us who bought from Amazon or any of the other online stores know the kind of packaging, the kind of cardboard boxes that the products come in. So people have also started to become more and more conscious about how that is impacting the environment. As Deloitte, what we've done is before the pandemic and now during the pandemic, we are running a longitudinal survey of customers across 16 countries to get a sense of almost every 6 weeks how people are behaving, how they are thinking about the pandemic, and from a sustainability perspective, how are they working with companies, how are they changing their behaviors. And again, we are seeing that consumers are becoming more and more conscious about the kinds of choices that they are making. So, for example, we did a 2019 poll, this was just before the pandemic, where we asked respondents from multiple developing countries to share what is it that they cared most about making decisions about brands. Right? And that's something that you'll see here. Increasingly, price, functionality, all of those are critical elements of decision making, but increasingly people are being more and more conscious of how the company treats its employees, how the company treats the environment, and how is the company having an impact in the communities that it operates. If we had done this survey a few years back, I know for sure that these percentages would have been significantly lower. What we're also seeing is organizations which are going back to their purpose and are organizing themselves in terms of who are the vendors they work with, what kind of people do they recruit, what's the messaging that they give to their customers. People who are tying all of that back to their purpose, they are seeing a significant increase in their revenues and profitability versus companies which aren't. So, for example, if you look at Unilever, they have about 28 sustainable living brands in their portfolio. You have brands like Dove, Vaseline, Lipton. And if you look at their financial performance in 2018, these brands delivered about 75% of the company's growth and about 60 and grew 69% faster than the rest of the business, which wasn't necessarily sustainable. So again, as I started off saying, the angle that I'm taking is how companies and the more progressive companies have started on a path where they don't see sustainability and profitability as trade-offs, but actually one which supports the other. There are examples, and again, as I talked about Unilever, those are good examples where companies have started to do that really, really well. Similarly, in the post-pandemic world, the left side, I talked about some of the work or a survey we did pre-pandemic. On the right are examples of some work or some surveys that we've done in the post-pandemic world. And again, consumers are almost voting with their dollars, saying that they do want to buy more from local products, the local communities. And again, it's also forcing companies to react to this changing behavior. So, how they work with their people, where they source material from, they're all doing it not because they think it's a good thing to do or it's it's a check in the box, but they are doing because that's the only way they will grow their profit and grow market share compared to their peers. And what this does is it clearly shows to companies who aren't necessarily following it, and companies who follow it have got that clear, who are looking at more circular economy. But companies who are still looking at businesses and value chains as like a linear growth model, where the aim of the business is profit maximization, efficiency maximization, and cost minimization. I think they are also increasingly seeing the impact that they're having on the environment, whether it's in terms of climate change, biodiversity loss, on the social side, health and safety, poverty, job insecurity. All of those micro issues are elements that they're seeing as almost a direct result of some of the choices that they're making by being in a linear economy. Similarly, you're seeing a lot of macro issues, the social and the economic diversity in a lot of countries, especially the developing countries, is becoming, even the developed countries for that matter, the social diversity is becoming, the economic diversity is becoming wider and wider. You look at some of the unrest in a place like US, lots of other geographies. Most of it is getting triggered by the economic diversity being so wide. So, finally they're kind of saying, if this is where a linear way of thinking about business is going to get to us, can we think about a different way of doing business? And to my mind, when we are speaking to CEOs, CXOs, and organizations, they're telling us that while a lot of this thinking did exist pre-pandemic, but just because of pandemic, there's almost like a trigger to accelerate the cause for change. And again, I'll just talk about a few examples and some numbers, which kind of give us some happiness that there are green shoots on the way. So if you look at companies, oil and gas companies, I know Peter, you work with oil and gas companies. So when you look at a Shell, a Total, a BP, they've all committed to become zero net carbon by 2050. Google's already announced to switch its entire operations to renewable energy by 2030. Apple's committed to be 100% carbon neutral for its supply chain and products. And the good thing is, even in India, if I look at the Tatas, if I look at the Mahindras, the Aditya Birla Group, they are also making commitments and making a lot of steps to move towards circularity through their companies and different subsidiaries. So again, I think a lot of positive shoots, a lot of things which are happening, and I think we're in the right direction. But having said that, I think some of these examples that I've talked about are almost the leading edge examples. Here again, a few quotes and a few data points from a surveys which we've done, which again say the same thing. While CEOs and CXOs recognize that it's an imperative, but they aren't necessarily doing too much about it. A lot of you on this call would probably know in August 2019, during the business roundtable, about 180 CEOs, US and across the world, led by Jamie Dimon, they actually pledged to think fundamentally differently about business. So, the entire notion of business being about maximizing shareholder value and investors being front and center of why businesses exist. The roundtable made a claim, and they signed a declaration, and it was all over the press, that they will make sure that they will move away from this notion of shareholder maximizing being the only reason why business exists. So they've talked about broadening that to stakeholder maximization. So what you do for your employees, how you deliver value to your customers, how you treat your employees fairly, dealing in an ethical and equitable manner with your suppliers, supporting the communities that you work, embracing social sustainability practices across your entire business, and making sure that you're working in an equitable manner. But again, while that roundtable happened and people made announcements, we haven't necessarily seen too much work on the ground. I know the pandemic hit early this year, and hence maybe they didn't have time. But again, I think we need to see a lot more action. We almost have a bipolar world in some senses. There are a few companies that I talked about who have taken who've taken it by the mantle and are making a lot of movement. The others are still kind of thinking, oh, how fast, how slow, when should we start? All of those things are kind of still existing in the marketplace. So when we did, as Deloitte, we did a survey and we looked at different archetypes of organizations, and I've talked in some senses, kind of talked about a few of these. So, the one on the extreme left is, the classical, traditional capitalist economy, shareholder maximizer, where everything is just targeted towards the investor. And the reason businesses exist is to maximize shareholder value, and everything else, in their view, would follow. And again, there are enough and more companies, and I don't need to talk about who these companies are, who are there. I think the next, some of the organizations who've kind of, who believe that, this is the shareholder maximizer framework is not the only way or the right way. I think they've started to do elements of sustainability, but again, sustainability is still not core to their purpose. Then we have companies like Google, who are impact integrators. So they're doing a lot for their communities. They are creating a lot of public utilities. So, if you look at something like Google Maps, some of the companies trying to reach the next 500 million population in India via free internet. So again, there are elements of companies which have started to think about it. P&G is again a good example of an impact integrator, where they're focused on reducing chemicals, reducing waste, and sourcing locally and ethically. The final, which again, the great thing is there are a few examples. So if you look at Tom Shoes, for example, as they say, the reason they exist is to do good to the society, and and they automatically make profits in that sense. So that's the kind of model I think over a period of time, we would like to see most organizations move to. But the good news now is there are a few case studies, case examples that other organizations can look at and aspire to. So, having talked about these different archetypes of organization from a sustainability perspective, what really prevents the organizations to move to the right? So if I talk about the sustainable innovator, that's the right hand side figure shows the value chain that a sustainable innovator follows. The left is what we call the traditional ecosystem. So everything is done here, everything is built in house. I am going to compete for resources with everybody, with my not just with my competitors, but even with my suppliers, with my customers. Everything is seen as a zero sum game. Classical example here is if you look at banks across the world, all of them, and again in different countries at different stages, all of them went the whole hog setting up ATMs in different cities, and in a lot of places they've just put ATMs next to each other because they were firmly of the belief that it's an ecosystem that I'm creating. I have to differentiate myself without necessarily thinking that if you collaborate and if you work together and you think of the customer first and if you think of the environment first, you could actually collaborate and have common sets of ATMs. But everybody actually just went and replicated the entire infrastructure, causing such a impact on the environment when that wasn't necessarily needed. Again, the right side, as I said, is again examples of sustainable innovators, which is what we call real ecosystem, where organizations are working not just within their own network, which is the top part, but also outside of their network, whether it's the social sector, the public sector, the financial sector, and making sure that when they take decisions, the decisions are from a point of view of optimizing the entire ecosystem and not just one part of the value chain. This is again how as organizations have started to think about sustainability and about a longer term view. We've started to see organizations move away from from midtermism, almost like we won't think about our sustainability plans over the next 2 to 3 years. We will take steps what gets us to our sustainable kind of view. But organizations are kind of starting to look at about a 5 to 10 year horizon, saying where is it that we want to do, and then coming back, which is what we call zoom in. The zoom out is looking at a 10 year horizon, zooming in back and saying, okay, what do I need to do in the next 12 months to make sure that I'm progressing towards the sustainable future that I've envisioned for my industry and for my company within that industry over the next 10 years. What is also interesting, and we've seen companies who've been successful in becoming more and more sustainable, is that they don't see sustainability as this new shiny toy, or it's not a check in the box that because the government's mandated you to do, you do it. And they don't also do it as a one-off thing. So this what we've done on this slide is from the left to right is just a value chain depiction of any company, right? The back end is the configuration, how you make your money, what kind of networks you have, how you're structured, what processes you follow. The one at the center, which is offering, is your core product or your core system. And the experience on the right is how you interact with your customers. So the true measure of sustainability for a company is if you start taking steps in each of the 10 elements of your value chain. So, if you are sustainable on let's say your channel, so how you What kind of channel partners do you have to send your products if they are sustainable, or if you're sustainable on the network in terms of you work with only vendors who are following all the best practices. That's not enough. I think you have to start thinking about each element of your value chain, which basically allows you to differentiate yourself in the market and make changes and make sure that everything that you do in every element of your value chain is sustainable. I think that's the only way you can get to a definition or an end goal of where you are a sustainable innovator. What we've also done, as part of our research, we've kind of looked at sustainable companies and how some of them are moving towards circular economy. And what are the business? So, I've talked about the value chain view. The next view is then, from a business model perspective, what are the different kinds of business models that exist? And again, like I talked about earlier, organizations are realizing that the linear way of doing business, which is about take, make, and waste, is not going to be something which will allow them to differentiate in the market or allow them to gain share, because consumers and customers are voting with their, with their dollars or with their rupees, and not necessarily buying products from organizations who continue to believe in the linear way of doing business. So again, there are a few examples. I can talk about Puma is a good example of how the cradle to cradle insoles that they have made, which are biodegradable sneaker products. Similarly, Xerox is committed to remanufacturing, reusing, and recycling its office equipment. Apple is again a good example of the third deposit system, where they actually take back their phones, refurbish them, and either sell it as a new product, or take out say the batteries or cobalt or some of the earth metals, rare earth metals, and then recycle them. So again, companies are starting to think about different models and making sure that they are at least adopting one or more of these models to make sure that they are moving away from a linear economy to a circular economy. I think the last thing I want to talk about is, as we speak to companies and help them in their journeys towards sustainability, I think one of the critical elements is what gets measured gets done. So unless and until, if you've started on your journey to sustainability, unless and until you're actually measuring how well you're performing on that, and how well you are, what metrics and how well you're tracking on those metrics, you will never make progress. So, there are, we have the standard obvious metrics around sustainability, whether it's GHG emissions, scope 1, scope 2. I don't want to talk about those. I want to talk from a business perspective. As an organization, how do you foster the right external and internal metrics? And again, at the same time, it's critical that the metrics that you measure have both leading and lagging indicators, because just having one doesn't necessarily give you the right picture. Again, we've just divided into 6 key elements. Don't want to talk about all of them, but again, elements of how your employees are perceiving, what kind of capabilities are you developing, and equally important, the perception of whether you're actually moving forward in your sustainability journey or not, whether it's third-party rankings, whether it's engagement with your external partners, doing surveys with them, whether it's your industry rankings that you get. So all of those kind of start becoming critical and important. So, just to wrap it up, I think, as I said, we've started to see a few companies who on that journey, who are certainly farther ahead in the journey, where the end state is you're not doing a trade-off between sustainability and profitability. But again, I think there are few green shoots. I think that's cause for optimism, but clearly a long way to go. On a positive note, I will say that the number of conversations we are having as a consulting firm with organizations who are coming and talking to us is really is really encouraging. So hopefully in a few years we would have definitely moved the needle and moved it far ahead. So yeah, that's what I had. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for giving me the chance to share my thoughts, and And I'm happy to kind of take questions or we can take it as part of the panel. So yeah, thanks again.
Thank you very much, Anjani, for that presentation. One of the slides I really liked was the 6-point action plan for corporates. And yes, that we will come back to that. I have a couple of questions. And so the first question is zero net carbon. The concept is very interesting, and we are talking about large corporates, multi-billion-dollar companies trying to reach out and achieve zero net carbon. But the base of a company, base of a country in Asia, India, China, Philippines, neighboring countries. How do you get SMEs and MMEs to start thinking in that direction? Because that is a widespread base at a country level for any Asian countries. So, any comments on that? How do we get SMEs, MMEs into the loop?
I think we've tried in the past as a country and largely in India and Asian countries to try and force that via regulations. Right, so the government will have a mandate in terms of CSR. There'll be carbon credit regulations. While I think it helps you start, but I don't think it moves the needle. I think the only way things will move is when companies actually start believing that this is the only way they will become market leaders. This is the only way, and more so for SMEs and medium scale, the small and medium scale enterprises, where they can't compete with the bigger guys in terms of scale, in terms of scope, in terms of cost, in terms of differentiation, funding, what have you. So this is a key element for them if they are convinced that if their differentiation is in terms of their sustainability strategy, how they work with their employees, with their vendors, and they can get that message across. And especially in the West, there are enough and more examples where much smaller companies are taking away share from larger companies simply because they've got that messaging right. And it's not just messaging, right? It is about actually doing, as I talked about, every element of your value chain. You're showing to the consumer that you're socially responsible, you're thinking of sustainability, and you're not just doing it because it's a good thing to do. You're doing it because you fundamentally believe. And some of those smaller companies are taking away share from the larger companies. So I think those are examples which if SMEs in India, other parts of Asia take note of and take learnings from, is a good way to take on some of the behemoths for whom levers and all are good examples, but a large part of them will just take too long to move or probably not very high on their management agenda.
Mm-hmm. Okay, my next question is again for you, but I would like Vanda, to give me an answer, and Daniel also to give me an answer. Once you give me an answer, so I would like all the three consultants on the panel to give me an answer to this. See, monitoring carbon is the job of the manufacturer. So typically, what happens is since Asia is the manufacturing hub, India and China are the manufacturing hub. It's our job to monitor carbon emissions, radiation, radioactives, whichever way it works. The consumers are in Europe and US. And we believe that only if the consumers start demanding that this is the company that I support or this is the product that I support, unless that happens, I don't think, or really, there is a school of thought which says that change will not happen till the time the consumer asks for it. So, what is your opinion on that?
Okay, when it comes to, because what we usually believe is that our manufacturers or suppliers is a separate entity from the organization who produces the product or service. However, that kind of thought, I think, has already evolved to that whatever the processes, policies, and procedures of your suppliers and your manufacturers are is reflective of the reputation, policies, and processes of the organization who is producing these products and services. It cannot be treated as a separate entity anymore. So if your suppliers from China, you're operating in Europe, then the impacts that are happening in China is the impact of the organization, whether it is located in Europe or in the US. And that is how we are looking at sustainability now. it has to be an interconnectedness, not of the different entities that the organization is employing, that the organization is working with. And there has to be a responsibility when it comes to monitoring your suppliers as well. And when we talk about the reaction of the stakeholders would be reacting not only against the operation of the suppliers or the operations of the manufacturers. You know, your stakeholders will be reacting against the company and how it is doing business.
Wanda, would you like to share your thoughts on this question?
Okay, thank you. I think that it's important what consumers is thinking about, but consumer has to have good information about the product and about the producer. So the quality of non-financial reporting should be good. And I think that in Europe, we are going in this direction. Our new law, which is under preparation, is going in this direction that this reporting should be better and should also show all this value chain, and this emission should be shown not only from the office in Europe, but in all value chain. I hope and I believe that it will be.
Okay. See, my follow-up question or comment is, I understand the supply chain, and I understand that every large company has to report what happens within their supply chain. And that is where your answer was, Daniel, that large companies will have to report from their supply chain, whatever manufacturing has been done in Asia or India, in Europe. But the problem is, I walk across the city, I buy a plastic toy for the children, which has a high content of lead, and it is manufactured in China. So that is where the problem is. The consumers are not really focused on buying. When you are buying, you are not really focused on the environment or any other mode of the sustainability. And that is where really the issue happens, because we are talking about a $1 trillion trade or a multi-trillion dollar trade without the hinges of a large company. So large companies and their supply chain is one thing, but beyond the large company and their supply chain, we see trillions of dollars of trade happening without a large company being involved. So there are manufacturers, and then there are traders, arbitrageurs, and then there are consumers. So till the time the consumer understands that, look, I should not be buying this product, manufacturers simply will not care, because they are SMEs or MMEs, and they are not a part of large companies which do a sustainable reporting. So that was the focus really of my question, that how does one start addressing, or how does even one start thinking in this direction of these trillions of dollars of trade happening without the aidness of the large company? So what are your thoughts? Anjali ji, would you like to have some thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think you're bang on. I think it has to start with the consumer. I think getting a change across the value chain without the consumer being the catalyst or the harbinger of that change is going to be extremely, extremely difficult. Because we're almost, it's like it's like Newton's laws of motion. Things are just going on, people are making money. There really isn't any need for anybody to change. So, if I'm the market leader, whether I'm a large corporation or a small corporation, and I'm making profits, there really isn't any need for change if the consumer keeps on buying my products. I think it's the day that the consumer starts demanding, and I do see that happening. I think I probably see that happening more with the millennial population, and I'm hoping it's seeping in across generations now as well. And fundamentally, as people, as we're seeing things around us, it's become very touchy and feely now. The climate change is no longer something that exists in a documentary. We see that every year. In a place like Mumbai, the rains are highest ever. Every time you read in the newspaper, everything is highest ever. The daily temperature is highest ever. amount of rain is highest ever. I think it's impacting each one of us. And I think each one of us is starting to make those choices in small ways, which is why I said I think it's a long journey. It is a long journey because, again, across different state of society, there are different needs. So if somebody who's just about making their ends meet, if you tell him or her that sustainability is critical and, buy something which is 10% more expensive, she's not going to listen to you.
Correct.
So, but over a period of time, as things start moving, I think you will start seeing that change. But I think you're right. It has to start with the consumer, the person who's paying with her dollars. Otherwise, it's really difficult to to move it from the manufacturer first and force it down the consumer.
Correct, correct. Before we move on to Daniel, I would like to clarify why I was asking you about the consumers. See, at CASI, we have 3 million student volunteers, and they are all teenagers. And the reason why we started this platform is because we feel somewhere our philosophy is that change will happen through youth. So if the youth starts demanding better clothes, better cars, better mobiles, by better I mean sustainable. Yeah. Then there is no way that companies cannot react to it. They will need to. There is no way governments cannot react to it. They will need to. And that is why we are working with this youth and promoting various issues, right from road safety to financial literacy to cleaning beaches, tribals, artifacts. That is the reason why we really started this platform. And now we are into multiple things. But the real reason was that we wanted the youth to go to the government and say, hey, I will not buy this. This doesn't work for me. And the youth is powerful. And that is where we started.
I think there is another important element. I think that's a good point that you mentioned about. So while the youth is a consumer, the youth is also an employee in these organizations, and
Correct.
as an employee, she can start that change. The youth is also an entrepreneur today, and when she's starting her own company, she can, she can pivot that change. So I think while consumer is one element, I think the role that youth plays across the value chain, whether as an employee, as an owner or as an entrepreneur, if they are supplying something. So you look at the entire value chain, right?
Correct.
And wherever they are playing a role, they can play that trigger role. So I think consumer is probably just one. All the other elements also are places where they can actually influence more sustainable practices.
I agree.
Absolutely.
Also, if I may just add to Anjani, I agree on that the youth they actually have a control when it comes to the operations, and they have now shifting behavior when it comes to what are the products that they would be availing of. And information is very much available to them. We have the internet, we have social media, and whatever happens locally or how these products are produced, it's public. It can be seen easily. And this would have reputational damages to the company, whether that company's headquarters is in the US and you are producing your products in India. One way or another, it's going to reach the US. And you mentioned about reporting. When we talk about reporting of sustainability performance, a company will have to report on its supply chain and its value chain. What are the impacts of its suppliers and manufacturers across the globe? And it will reflect on the company. And these issues will be brought forward. And those who would be reacting would not only be those who are affected locally, where the manufacturers or suppliers are operating, but consumers globally. As mentioned by Wanda, they have to be informed, and information is very much available to us nowadays, not only through the sustainability reports, not only through financial reports, but we get real-time information through social media. And the youth have the power to control this. They are the ones who are influencing the information that is made available in social media.
Correct. Absolutely right, Daniel. And that sort of strengthens our cause. We are happy we are working in the right direction at CASI. So let me come to you. Tell me, Daniel, what is your angle when you decided to work in the business of sustainability, in the arena of CSR and sustainability? There must have been something that you saw. There must have been something that you want to change. There is something, there is a value which you created, and you say, okay, this is the value that I will provide. I will make this change, and this is how it will work. So what is your angle really? Please tell us.
Okay. So sustainable development is not a new concept. It is also not a new term. The term of sustainable development started in the 1980s, but then the definition was very much considered to be more on the side of environmental impacts. So when we talk about sustainable development as defined, it is being able to uh, provide the needs of the present generation without compromising the needs of the future generation. And then we had organizations who were talking about standards, and the standards that were coming out were mostly on environmental standards. And because of the environmental impacts that were happening during the 80s, wherein industrialization was very much what businesses were moving towards. So for me, sustainable development is the why of all of these. Where are we going? Why are we doing all these? Why is sustainability being talked about now? But then what is the goal? The goal is sustainability. We want to make sure that businesses are conscious about how they are doing things, what they are doing, and what types of products and services they are producing at present, and what are the future impacts of these products and services. And in time, we heard about the term corporate social responsibility, or CSR, because the focus was in business organizations. Business organizations are the most influential entity in organizations. And so my interest in this is that the terminologies itself, of course, had an impact on me, on my studies, and in my work. But then my angle now, presently on sustainability, is the importance of measuring and monitoring sustainability performance of organizations. And because we always talk about how the questions that I had were, how do we define what a sustainable business is? What do we mean by a sustainable organization? How do we exactly measure how sustainability is? So businesses have requirements and the responsibility to move towards operating the goal of sustainable development, and sustainability reporting is a way to do that. And one of the standards when it comes to sustainability reporting nowadays that is being used and also being promoted by governments, regulators, and also organizations of different sizes, the most comprehensive standards and framework that we have is of the Global Reporting Initiative. And they are working closely with other organizations to integrate these sustainability standards and frameworks so that more and more organizations would move towards measuring and managing impacts. It comes from the premise, this is also from the GRI, or the Global Reporting Initiative, that what cannot be measured cannot be managed. This was mentioned by Anjani, and what cannot be managed cannot be changed. If you do not see where you are at now, then how would you know what to manage and where you are going? So sustainability reporting also integrates the principles of knowing and aligning an organization's operations with sustainability standards. It also promotes stakeholder inclusivity, because most of the time when we talk about stakeholders, we refer to external stakeholders. But in sustainability reporting, it shows a comprehensive list of factors and standards that when we talk about stakeholders, we have to start from within your internal stakeholders. What is the impact of your operations when it comes to employees? What are the policies that you have that will protect your employees? And how, because the whole integration of sustainability cannot be a one-time big time thing. You have to know where you are going and start with what is most material and what is most aligned when it comes to sustainability standards according to the operations of my business. And so a sustainability report is somehow able to paint a picture of the sustainability performance of an organization or a business. And it also reports and communicates where the company is going in terms of these initiatives. And it opens networking and a greater ecosystem of collaborating with the business ecosystem, with NGO, with non-government organizations, with the governments, with regulators, and with international standard organizations. And so when you are able to manage and measure your sustainability impacts, then you are also able, if this happens year per year or however companies or organizations do it, then an organization is able to see and integrate what is the value that sustainability brings to the organization. How does it impact my customers? How does it impact my employees? And most importantly, of course, how does it impact my shareholders? And when we talk about shareholders and shareholder value, what they are looking for is, do these types of operations or how you are doing business, will it increase revenue? Will it decrease the costs? Will it decrease the risks? And will it increase growth? And that is how sustainability works, and the measurement of sustainability performance is. It somehow helps you build from where you are to where you want to be. And I think that is the most important now to do, especially at this time. 2020 has been a very interesting year, especially for organizations who have already started to do sustainability reports. The focus of 2020 will not just be on the operations itself, but the impacts of how COVID has been to the operations and what the organization did for its employees, for its consumers, and for the other organizations that have been in the supply chain or the value chain of the business. And all these shifting behaviors and the shifting focus of regulatory bodies, the shifting focus of the exchange, all of these are integrated in the sustainability reports and are reflected in the performance of the business.
So Daniel, I have a question for you.
Mhm.
And you can tell us quickly, short 2-3 lines. Business value creation through sustainability studies is one of your interests.
Mhm.
Yeah. So what do you typically advise for a company in Asia? How do they create business value through sustainability? What are the top 3 things that will result? How will it help a company?
I think well, introspection is one, of course. As I mentioned, you have to know where you are for you to be able to begin your sustainability journey and create value in the process. What are the resources that are available to you? What are the current policies that you have? Do these policies align with international standards and norms? And how are the processes being done in the organization? Do these also align with international policies and norms? Is it compliant with local regulations and international regulations? And all these have to be taken into consideration if a company would really want to create that business value. We are not only looking anymore into just the profit margin. Of course, that is very important. At the end of the day, you have to earn and increase that revenue in order to sustain your sustainability initiatives. But then you also have to make sure that you know where you are and you know where you're going.
Thank you very much, Daniel. Coming to you, Wanda. Um, good to have you on the panel. Thank you very much for being here, Wanda. You are a senior consultant. You have worked with, you have conducted workshops with corporates. You work across stakeholders, shareholders. So please tell us, what is your angle on CSR and sustainability? What is it that you want to promote? What is it that you want the result, the action? What's your typical angle?
Thank you. I have very long professional experience, 50 years, so I made a lot of different kind of work and see a lot, saw a lot resolution in different enterprises. I started from theoretical physics, and then I was IT expert and environmental protection expert, even international expert on air emission, and I cooperate with EEA. And it was the place when I first time heard about sustainable development, and I started to learn about that. And now, especially after this from 2015 years when we have now this 17 Sustainable Development Goals, which I like a lot, and I hope that such integrated view on these goals will help us to implement sustainable development in our real enterprise and real life. I think that these goals are not only for government, they are for business also, all kinds of businesses, for NGOs, for everybody. And I have to say that I developed this workshop for small and medium enterprises because I am sure that in few years, 2-3 years, it will be very necessary to them to know how to live in this new world. I think that we will have new world. Better.
Absolutely correct. Wanda, do you have a presentation for us?
Yes.
Please, please.
Well, when can I have? Oh, yes, here.
You can just share screen tab.
So as I said, I very like this poster with the 17 goals because I see here 17 full of hope points. I prepare presentation about business responsible strategy because I think that all enterprise will have in a few years will be obliged to have such strategy. Decision about that will be in governed body of this enterprise. Is it possible to map all 17 SDGs to company business strategic goals? There are different point of view all over the world, but I think that yes, it is possible, and we can see it on this in this document, which show us how to do that. So the rules for mapping of all the 17 SDGs to company business responsible goal is to prepare goals for core activity and for impact and collaboration, thinking about people and planet. Next, to check harmonization of this goal with the goals of local authority strategy. I will show for these two examples of goals how to do such mapping. So for each SDG, we have a lot of targets. For 16, it was on the screen. So, for example, for target 16.5, we can set such goal for our enterprise: obligatory implementation of a company code of ethics, a chapter about corruption and bribery in all their forms into company activities. And for cooperation, promotion of the company code of ethics in the value chain. Another example for 16.10, we can to set such goal: ensure public access to financial and non-financial company information. Another for 17.14 target: creation and implementation of business responsible coherent strategy, coherent with local authority responsible strategy. And for cooperation, promotion of the creation of such implementation of business responsible strategy in value chain. How to, when we will have this mapping, ready mapping for all 17 SDGs, we have to think how to manage that. One of the tools which we have to use is a balance scorecard, and the new version of the balance scorecard ready for sustainable development management. This balance scorecard has additional, new balance scorecard has additional perspectives. The perspective of customer is split for customer, environment, and society perspective. So after mapping, we have to make analysis as a base for preparing our strategy. Then to discuss with governing body about result of this analysis and mapping the goals. Then reformulate purpose and chosen goals based on analysis of the standard of non-financial reporting. And then prepare new balance scorecard and prepare it for management for implementation. Development of politics, procedure, codes of ethics, editing the business responsible strategy and adequate strategies, governance and management of the business responsible strategies operation, and risk and uncertainty analysis also. If we will do all this work, we will be ready to have integrated reporting. And is business responsible strategy also for small and medium enterprises and NGOs? I think that yes, it is. And in October, it was published a new document from UNDP. And in this document, we see that this is for all size enterprises, all NGOs and public sector entities, and for all geographical location. For very small micro enterprises and micro NGOs, and for everybody, we can start with Good Life Goals Manual. I am writing a book for small and medium enterprises, helping them to understand how to prepare such kind of strategy. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Wanda, for that presentation. One thing which is amazing is that you are actually able to convince small and medium enterprises to come to the workshop, to understand, to learn, and to share, sustainable practices, which is really amazing because I find that very difficult to reach out to SMEs and MMEs. While large corporates are monitored by regulation and governments, shareholders, activists are looking at them, so they don't really have a choice but to listen to me. But reaching out to SMEs, MMEs is a different ballgame altogether. So really kudos to you on that front. You're doing an amazing job on that. So I have a common complaint because there are 3 consultants on this panel. I could not resist but to voice out my opinion. And we have consultants from across the world. And we have a consultant in the audience, a close friend, Patrick, from Europe, but in China. My problem is, while we get a lot of reports, so I get a lot of reports from the Big Four and other consulting firms, dipstick methods, large corporates doing so many things in CSR and sustainability, and voices, chairman, CEO, whichever way. But I see very few supply chain, hardcore supply chain reports, because that is where the detail is. in the supply chain. So while it is one thing for a company to say that yes, we support, we are doing this, we are doing gender diversity, all that is okay. Maybe the company is not doing it. Maybe women in India have started studying and they are keen to work, and so they are getting a job. Maybe the company has not done anything, but they are in the positivity because girls have started working in India typically. But we see very low, supply chain reports, which is where the detail is. So, any comments on that? I'm sorry to make it so.
Okay.
Yeah, please, please.
Okay, for sure. This is a start for talking with small and medium enterprises. In Poland, also, our ministry is performing such kind of workshops for small and medium enterprises, because in Europe, I think we will have maybe in a few years obligatory to report non-financial information also as small and medium enterprises. But also that they organize such workshop to spread information about global about SDGs, to learn what these goals what thinking by the goals can give them. So for sure, the most hard work and not possible now to be good in that is to have information from value chain for small and medium enterprises, especially because you need money or law for that.
Correct. Correct. Well, what is your opinion, Anjani sir, on the supply chain reports?
So I think I've seen some movement. I think that the challenge is just the global nature of the supply chains and how integrated they are and how complex they are. I think that makes it slightly difficult and challenging. But I think from our perspective, we are seeing a lot of MNCs and both European and American MNCs now reaching out to us and helping and asking for help in making their supply chains which are more sustainable. A lot of them have huge investments in China and Asia from a manufacturing perspective, depending on what sector they are. It's China, Taiwan, Korea, Vietnam. But we are seeing a few clients coming and saying, look, can you help us make our supply chains more sustainable? So I am seeing a move. I think it is a complex topic. So it's probably, you haven't seen as many, but I think it's a very critical issue as well.
Sure, absolutely. Thank you for your opinion. We can have questions. That was the end of the session. We can have questions from the audience, or the speakers can ask each other questions. Please feel free. We have the next 2-3 minutes for questions, please.
Well, I can ask a question if no one else has one.
Oh, yeah, please.
Yeah, so building a little bit about, of course, I liked your question about the supply chain. I think a lot of good things have been mentioned in these. I learn a lot all the time, and I think the challenge of the sustainability definition, I think, has been mentioned. What I would highlight is then I think there's an awareness within the corporation on how sustainable they are and how sustainable they are trying to be. I mean, there's an actual sustainability, and then there's an awareness within the corporation understanding that. And then you have the reporting of that awareness. And then you have the consumer awareness. And I can see a lot of gaps in between those different levels. And I also see a difference between awareness and perception. I think there's a lot of perception of consumers, to certain companies. They see some companies as being very good, some sectors as being very good, and some as being bad. And that's not real awareness either. So that's kind of, I don't know if there's a question in there. I mean, one comment I can mention just about Apple, because I think Apple is always mentioned as a good company. But just this week, I saw reports that investors are looking at air pollution in China as an indicator that Apple is ramping up their production. So if Apple is such a sustainable company, why is air pollution going up in China? Because they're making more iPhones. So that's
Yeah, that is one way of looking at it. Do you have a opinion on that, Daniel or Anjali?
I think my comment when it comes to that would be one of the gaps that I see is when it comes to the local government regulations, because suppliers will comply with what is required of them where they are operating. But if it is not a requirement for them, then why would they invest on resources? So government compliance to government regulations and the existence of these policies and regulations locally. When we talk about sustainability, it's true what Patrick said, that the corporates, business organizations are very much aware about sustainable development and how sustainability is being defined and practiced in the corporate world. But when we talk about government and government regulations, then that is a different entity. And I am just not very confident that sustainability and sustainable development are well embedded in the current regulations that we have in many local governments. And that could be a factor why suppliers are not also coming up with very robust and comprehensive reports and or certifications that are compliant with international standards. Because again, if it is not part of regulation, then why invest in the effort?
So I understand Mitesh has a question, but before that, I would like to make an announcement. We have with us a very special guest, Hayden. Hayden is from Trinidad and Tobago, the 2017-2020 Chief Executive Officer for the Securities Exchange Board at Trinidad and Tobago. So thank you, Hayden, for joining us.
Most welcome. Very listening to a very interesting discourse.
Mitesh, your question, please.
Yeah, I have a question from our viewers for Anjani sir. I'll just read out. As consultants, do you influence corporates to do good, or is it only when the corporates decide to do good that you advise them on how to do it?
So, I think there are two sides to it. One is we of course help them. If the need comes from them and they've identified that, we definitely help them. But I think as part of some of the efforts, reaching out to corporates, sharing stories of other companies, we also hope to in some ways be evangelists. So we try to do that in terms of some of our road shows, in terms of sharing sessions, in terms of having conversations. So we do both. So of course, if company comes up with something, then we definitely support them. But even otherwise, because it's becoming such a big imperative that conversations with clients start veering towards that, saying, okay, how do I differentiate myself? What can I do differently? So when those kinds of conversations happen, we share stories of what others are doing in other geographies, in other industries, and hope that they take inspiration from that.
Makes sense. Thank you.
Now here, I would like to make a comment really. We are in the information dissemination business, so we disseminate a lot of information, and some of the Big Four reports are very inspiring, really. So because we get to read what other companies are doing, and then it inspires us, it inspires our clientele, and the 3 million students who we reach out to regularly. So yes, I agree with Anjani ji. The information that you disseminate, it kind of motivates and inspires others. Hello. Yeah, sorry, I had some misfunctioning on my
No, we can
laptop.
hear you.
Yeah, we
can
could
hear
hear
you.
you. We could hear you.
Okay. So with that, we come to the end of our session for today. This was in conversation with. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you very much, Anjani ji, Daniel, Vanda, Patrick, Hayden, all our viewers. Thank you very much for being here today.